You're live, Your Worship, whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. All right, Council, I have 5 o'clock, so I'm going to call our Strategic Initiative Standing Committee meeting to order for Monday, April 4th, 2022. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who are families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship that it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in the area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. With that, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda, and the motion reads as follows. The content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for April 4, 2020 be adopted as amended, and the amendment is that this meeting is being held by video conference only. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us then to item 3, which is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations today? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. After speaking with the Integrity Commissioner today, in the past, I've never done anything in regards to the BAA because, to be honest, we just accept their budget. But with this in mind, in regards to C22-14 tonight, depending on the committee and council's decision, and with respect to said item, the Downtown Collingwood Business Improvement Area BIA will have a significant pecuniary interest in the outcome. That interest is my indirect interest, and as I am a member of the BIA, and may in fact represent a direct interest to me at some point in time. I am therefore declaring disqualifying interest in the matter and will not be partaking in the discussion or the voting. And to be honest, I'll even probably step away from Mr. Conning's deputation.
Thank you there for that, Councillor Madigan. So noted. Are there any other declarations tonight, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation, please let us know. Item 4, we had a deputation scheduled, 4.1. At the request of the deputants, we have moved them down to the item on the agenda regarding the BIA Archway, and they may speak to it at that time as per the rules for an SIC meeting. And that brings us then to item 5.1, which is the update on water capacity and land use planning study. And I'll pass it over to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next slide, please. So as you are aware, Council has asked for a weekly update for the public and Council members around the interim control bylaw. And with respect to this, water supply agreements, tendering, construction, and the like are updated. Most of these are updated today, and those that are not are just in the process of being updated and will be part of future updates. Thank you. Next slide. So the situation has been, the overall water situation has been the same since the beginning, largely. Our water supply is safe and available. As soon as Council was made aware of this difficult situation, you and they, depending on the listener, have been very proactive and transparent and taking an approach that seeks both further capacity and manages the remainder that we have for the overall benefit of the community and to grow as a complete community. So we have a staff recommended and Council endorsed using an interim control bylaw, which temporarily and transparently paused development to ensure that we grow as a complete community. During that period, an exemption process was developed. And we looked at those proposed developments that were ready to go through a new lens, in the complete community lens. And all of those that were ready to go in 2021 have moved forward, and a number have also moved forward in early 2022. And if you do wish to do a residential renovation or addition, or perhaps change some uses in an existing business, and you're not sure if you can continue, please talk to our planning or building areas. Many things can continue, not everything, but it behooves one to ask to make sure. We certainly want to keep things moving where we can, and staff will endeavor to be quite helpful. With our chlorine currently maximized in cold weather and new ultraviolet expected at the existing plant, we are closing in on the capacity to meet expected growth if the plant expansion is completed at the end of 2025 or early 2026. And we recently presented to council some of the SDUs or water volumes that could be expected in the next 2 or 3 years if in the current situation. And they would keep the current level of building approximately the same as it has been the past several years. So I think that has been good news, not quite where we want to be ultimately, and thus we've taken a few other steps that you'll see in this presentation. Next slide. So first we'll talk about water capacity. So this is the plant itself. Next slide. So recently we are narrowing in on an agreement with New Tecumseth at the staff level. We do have one more important discussion this week. So we hope to bring something back to our respective councils in the next few weeks. With respect to the expansion of the plant, I'd mentioned recently that the drinking water works permit has been amended, so that's a big step. That's to incorporate the UV disinfection slated for late this year, early next year. We have bids for construction of the interim UV received, and a constructability review scheduled in April with the general contractors who were shortlisted to provide that work for us. I probably mentioned this previously, but we're quite happy to date with this approach, whereby the ultimate general contractor will be among a group of contractors who are looking at the plans now, so that if there are any constructability issues, they can help us work through those before the actual tender documents are put out for bids. And we are working hard on an approach for tracking services allocation of water and wastewater for the implementation of the new policy that I'll get to in a moment. Next slide, please. We are largely on track. I have this week highlighted that finalizing the agreement with New Tecumseth is the only item where we had anticipated to be finished during the winter, and I believe we've now changed seasons, so that one is behind. Everything else remains on track for delivery at this point, so we're hoping to stay there. Next slide. The remaining water supply hasn't changed from last week. The allocation right now, that the remaining amount that could be allocated is 489 single development units. After the interim UV is installed in the current plant, we will be able to go up to the 1,280 that's shown in the bottom middle of this chart. And once we have construction significantly underway, council will also be provided with some advice on the ability to release some of our with water that's been withheld as a safety factor. Thank you. Next slide. The town is not currently entertaining applications for interim control bylaw exemptions. We had set a deadline that has now passed. However, if you have been granted an exemption, please continue through the planning and building permit processes. Under the policy for the allocation of water, it's been proposed that that exemption will endure for an additional year beyond the current anticipated end date of the ICBL. If you haven't been granted an ICBL, planning applications are continuing to be processed. However, the actual council planning decision would follow a future exemption or completion of the interim control bylaw. Next slide. Now, the land use planning study. So this is the study portion and the subsequent development instruments. We are past the end of our plan. We're very, very close to the end. The policy for allocation is complete and approved by council. We have completed the zoning bylaw. However, we did receive several appeals during the appeal period that was open for the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. There were 3 appeals received. One from Amber Stewart Law on behalf of John Welton, one from Aridin Bearless on behalf of 2554281 Ontario Limited, which related to the address of 121 Hume, and a third from Aridin Bearless on behalf of Crestpoint Real Estate, which is related to the address of 2 and 6 Old Mountain Road and 5, 7, and 15 Balsam Street. The second 2 of those do have exemptions from the interim control bylaw. Next slide, please. So we are endeavoring to meet as a priority on a without prejudice basis with the appellants, the 3 on the previous slide. We will be providing legal and technical advice to council on the next steps once the scope and nature of these appeals are better understood. Our target is to do that in April. Next steps may include consideration of additional exemptions to the interim control bylaw. However, in the ideal situation, we would like to resolve these appeals in short order and be able to move forward with the new paradigm that we've considered with council, using the finalizing these appeals, having them either being withdrawn or disposed of through the Ontario Land Tribunal, so that we can move to the new paradigm. We if in fact these appeals are not withdrawn or disposed of, the Planning Act dictates that Collingwood's interim control bylaw will be automatically extended. Next slide. And that's the update for today. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Council, any questions or comments on that? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So through you to our CAO, as the reports have been going along, originally the project was for completion of 2025, and then the wording started moving into late 2025, early 2026. And now the wording has moved to if plant expansion is completed 25-26. And the further this pushes out, the higher our costs go, and somebody on council in 2026 will be getting a memo to say we don't have enough money set aside to do this project. Could you comment, CAO Skinner, on the completion of the plant seems to be like nailing jello to a tree? And if you just could comment on if there's going to be a point in the foreseeable future that we'll be able to have some confidence as to when that completion date is going to be.
CAO Skinner, do you want to take that? I see that Director Slama has showed up as well. Who wants to answer this question?
I'll ask Director Slama to comment first. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So a couple of items that I wanted to mention about the timing of the completion of the plant. So one is when we looked at the proposals that were brought forward by the consultants, with one of the requirements being that the plant would be completed by the end of 2025. The consultants that we selected, AECOM, presented a proposal where they presented that they would be able to commit to the commissioning of the additional capacity by the end of 2025. But they did note that they would there would be works that would be completed beyond that point. Essentially what their proposal looked at is building the new facility and having that new capacity commissioned before the end of 2025. And then they would move to the existing plant and work on the renovations and upgrades to be completed on that portion of that building on the site. So that's one nuance of why we've changed that wording. And we have tried to be clear to say that, and to say going forward, right, that we're looking at commissioning that capacity before the end of 2025, but acknowledging to the community that they are going to see work on the site continue to probably mid-2026 at least. And then the other comment I would make is just, you know, post-COVID, we do have a lot of concerns about supply chain issues. So again, our consultants are doing an amazing job of staying on track when it comes to the design of the facility. And, you know, we have pre-selected the major equipment. We're, you know, moving ahead with our tenders and moving ahead in pieces to secure components of the plant, but there is an element that is unknown to us. And I think so part of it is we're trying to be honest and say with these supply chain issues, our final point where we're really going to have a better idea is the beginning of 2023 when we see the tender bids come in. And we see what the prices are, and we see if the general contractors have indicated that they anticipate any delays with any components.
Thank you, Director Slama. CEO Skinner, did you want to have anything to add to that?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jeffrey, any follow-up?
Yeah, just a small one. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, through to Director Slama or the CAO. And I'm wondering if an update to our slides to explain that more clearly might be better for the community to understand that we're still aiming for a commissioning of the capacity we need for 2025 and the remaining parts that will be done in 2026. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think staff noted that. And we'll make that clarification. Are there any other questions or comments, Council, on the presentation? Seeing none, then that brings us to staff reports. And item 6.1 is C 2022-14 Downtown Collingwood Archway Gateway feature. Councillor Madigan, I know you are going to recuse yourself based on your conflict, and I will pass this over to Clerk Almus to take us through the presentation. And would just note again that our deputants had requested that there be allowed their 10-minute time allotment after the presentation from staff today. So I'll pass it over to Clerk Almus. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do have a brief slide deck here to share with the committee and the public regarding the background that was requested at the council meeting in the end of March prior to further consideration on approvals for the Archway. I will note that the staff report did indicate the BIA general manager, it was submitted by the general manager together with myself as clerk, and that was an error on our part. There was input, significant input on the background that the BIA had to provide to us to fulfill the request from council, and it should have been identified in that input from other sources component. The general manager of the BIA, Sue Nicholson, will be providing some additional context specific to the BIA's position on the matter following my presentation before we'll entertain the public discussions. And maybe we'll just move to the first slide. So the background to the Archway, it was a conceptual drawing of the Archway, was discussed with the BIA Board of Management in June of 2016 and presented a general membership to their membership in 2018. It was identified as a long-term priority based on the following studies. There was a number of studies undertaken, including the Heritage Conservation District Plan, the Collingwood Downtown Wayfinding Signage Report, the Collingwood Tourism Strategy and Action Plan, which was part of the Economic Development Action Plan. The Archway project had been included in the BIA's annual report and budget presentation to council each year since 2019, as well as the annual general meetings of the BIA. There was $25,000 transferred from reserve for the project that was anticipated to be initiated last year, that was approved by council in May 2021, that was approved as part of the total budget presentation. The BIA received federal provincial funds to cover 100% of the costs, and this was just advised to the BIA this year. And again, the funding details cannot be prescribed yet, as it is part of the funding award component of that. So that was 100% of the cost, with the potential to fund another gateway feature at the south end of the BIA. Together with this background, I should note too that the BIA did take their proposal through the pre-consultation site development process that was recommended by staff. They met with the Heritage Committee and received the Heritage approval from the Heritage Committee. They also had established a design review committee, and all of that further detail is identified in the full report that's in today's agenda package. So I'll jump right into the options that we're looking at. The report did identify 5 options, but 2 were duplicates. So 1 and 5 were the same. So I'll present the 4 options for council's consideration. And the first option is to proceed with the Archway as presented to the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee on March the 7th. It is a fully funded, and I should remind council and the public that it is a fully funded project that was coming from the BIA's budget, and now together with the 100% funds being received through their grant process, there will be no input or impact to the members or their future levy for this project. So again, financial impact, as we've identified, as 0. And option 2 we provided is to cancel the Archway in its entirety. So should the Archway project be canceled at this stage, the BIA would be impacted with a loss of $32,000 plus HST. The federal grant that was approved totaled to $425,000, and this funding included the cost of the Archway and a potentially second Archway at the south end of here, Ontario Street, as well as, I shouldn't say Archway, it hadn't been confirmed, it hasn't been discussed at this point, and could have been just a gateway feature. The funding also provided monies towards laneway upgrades and enhancement of the Collingwood Discover app. The BIA cannot predict the impact a cancellation or delay will have on the grant at this time. The grant will not cover costs for incomplete or canceled projects. So this financial impact would be the loss of monies already spent. And again, $32,000 represents approximately 7% of their annual budget. A third option for council's consideration is postponing the Archway and undergoing a visioning exercise. And this has been something that's been contemplated by staff for sure, and I believe shared with council as something that would be prudent to understanding the significant changes that may be happening in the downtown. If we have an art center in the downtown, impacts on our future parking programs and transportation needs, as well as future event plannings. A visioning exercise would be a prudent next steps. And again, that would include residents and businesses. However, it would require funds to be allocated by council and could not be completed prior to 2023. Consultation with the stakeholders has already been undertaken for the existing Archway, being the consultation that was undertaken with staff, as well as the consultation piece that happened for the development components of the Archway that was presented. Many downtown businesses have struggled during the pandemic and require an immediate increase in visitor traffic. So this feature was designed, and the funding received was through a program that specifically looked at recovery, basically, for commercial businesses. The financial impact of this is that the BIA membership would lose their $32,000 of their levied revenue, as well as losing the full federal grant funding for the project, approximately $140,000, plus the additional gateway feature at the south end of here, Ontario Street. as the deadline for projects to be completed for the funding opportunity is March 2023. A fourth option is undertaking a public consultation on different design concepts. So within the staff report that we provided, they did provide different color options of the current design. However, we'd reached out to, the BIA had reached out to the successful proponent that was doing design build installation on the project, and they've indicated that they could provide additional conceptual drawings that would require engineering reviews, proper drawings being prepared, and they estimate that would be approximately $20,000. So I should note here that as part of the report, the $20,000 anticipated would be at the BIA's expense. However, council may consider whether they may want to assume any or all of additional costs pertaining to additional conceptual designs that could be included on our Gauge webs and Gauge Collingwood website to get to allow the public an opportunity to express their opinions. The next item that we've looked at, so these were some of the additional color renderings. If you want to go to the next one and the next one. So it was blue, gray, and a burgundy background that was also provided. Obviously, there wouldn't be any additional cost if it was just these three color renderings, as they're already in place. It would be if we required different conceptual drawings on a different designed structure. Next slide. And lastly, as part of the request from council at the end of March, was to look at the processes to improve the communications on such significant projects like this. So within the staff report, we've made the following recommendations to changes to the MOU. And as a reminder that the MOU was approved by council in December. So this process had already been well underway by the time the MOU was approved. But I will note that currently within the MOU, it does provide that initiatives to construct or enhance infrastructure in the downtown shall require the town's approval and be at the expense of the BIA unless otherwise approved by council. So we are recommending an amendment to the MOU that would identify the following 2 points: that the BIA present a plan for significant infrastructure requests that identifies the proposed process, timelines, staff and or stakeholder participation, and membership and public consultation expectations. The plan will require council approval. Council will identify any initial consideration will identify upon initial consideration any recommended changes and public consultation requirements to the plan. Any significant changes to the plan or design for the proposed infrastructure will require, again, council approval. We're also recommending that significant permanent infrastructure installed on municipal lands also requires an encroachment agreement to be entered into with the town. This agreement would outline provisions specific to the infrastructure and provide for ongoing funding and resources for maintenance and future improvements as the infrastructure ages, as well as any indemnification and insurance requirements that are recommended by staff. Next slide. So the recommendation, again, this was the recommendation that came through the Corporate Community Services meeting on March the 7th that was deferred until this report was presented. And we've added the additional recommendation about changes to the MOU. And that is it.
All right, thank you for that, Clerk Lomacet. I think before I open it to the public generally, I will grant the BIA, and I understand we have General Manager Sue Nicholson here tonight to speak to this matter. The 10 minutes that was allotted through the deputation.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I think that, one of the main things that we want to chat about is that I know there's been a lot of comments about everyone knows where the downtown is, but this is not targeted to people who live here, who know where it is. It's the Wayfinding and Tourism Study have specifically noted that the downtown is not easily found. that the highway that runs through it is certainly a liability to the downtown core, and specifically recommended this gateway installation as part of the wayfinding project that we have worked with the town to implement over the years since the study was first initiated. So we have worked, this is one of the components of that study that was recommended. It's designed for the business community, for the BIA, to ensure that our downtown commercial area continues to attract people from elsewhere so that our independent businesses remain thriving and commercially viable. We get great support from our local community, and we understand that, and we know that that our local and regional community love the downtown and support it very, very well. But in order to grow our business community, we need to be able to continue to draw from the visiting population. And in this way, by having a vibrant downtown through the support of people from away, our population as a whole will benefit by living in a community with a thriving and proudly historic business area. Each of these studies and reports published followed input from stakeholders, compiled by experts, made recommendations on their findings for the town to take actions for improvement. All incorporate a vision of specific initiatives. With due respect, consultant firms and staff studies and reports are not seen by our community as real work, but they are necessary groundwork that supports the basis for real physical changes to be implemented. The implementation of the recommendations is the real work that will ultimately benefit the community. On the weight of the information from the wayfinding study and the tourism study, we made the decision as a BIA to go ahead and spend our members' funds to highlight and celebrate the entrance to our downtown. As noted in the staff report, all of the details of this project have been minuted both at the BIA and Heritage Committee meetings, which were approved by council following the meetings. The BIA certainly took this as a green light to proceed with our plans for the arch, expecting that you understood and agreed with what had been approved. An open call for residents to offer design opinion is a recipe for confusion. A design needs to be focused based on the physical environment and with input from direct stakeholders. In this case, BIA members, the Collingwood Museum, the Heritage Committee, and with input from appropriate staff. This design did not come out of the blue. It is a result of thoughtful input in various design meetings, incorporating all of those stakeholders. The design elements of the arch are, as presented, were developed through 6 revisions, each revision reviewed for comment and changes. The elements include the height and positioning in accordance with MTO guidelines and following comments from town engineering. Finishes in accordance with the heritage guidelines for the downtown. The shape is an elegant arch over the street. The letter style used is the same as the Discover Collingwood signage that has been installed and implemented in the downtown core to aid in pedestrian wayfinding. The finials at the top of the columns are designed to match the light standards in the downtown. The arch was changed from a single-sided to a double-sided so that when approaching from the south, it highlights the historic waterfront. This is important as the waterfront master plan moves forward with new development over the next several years. The graphics are mounted close to the background structure to eliminate snow accumulation and bird nestings, these issues raised by town engineering. The brick bases are intended to visually connect the arch to the surrounding architecture of the built form of the buildings, as well as the public streetscape. The Heritage Committee is designing plaques, which will be applied to the brickwork to formally identify the downtown core as one of the few multi-building areas in the country recognized on the Canadian Registry of Historic Places. It is the mandate of the BIA to promote the town. One of our mandates is to promote the downtown. The Gateway Arch is a recommendation by independent experts as an initiative to do just that. As noted, the grant funding that we have received is tourism focused, designed to have immediate impacts, and is vital to the recovery of our businesses after the effects of the pandemic. The grant funding, as noted, also incorporates other initiatives that will add to the beautification of downtown and allow for additional marketing initiatives that will increase tourism to the downtown. We certainly don't argue that a visioning exercise is important and needs to be undertaken, and we would be happy to partner with the town on that initiative. But right now, this is funding that will allow for immediate impact to our businesses that desperately need it. Thank you.
Very much, General Manager Nicholson. Clerk Almus, I'll look to you to see if there's anyone in our audience who would like to speak to either of these presentations.
Thank you, Your Worship. The public is allowed to address the committee regarding the staff report for a maximum of 5 minutes. If you're interested, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. There's no interest at this time to speak to this report, Your Worship.
All right, thank you, Council. Or thank you, Sarah. And Council, as there are options in this report, I'm not going to put a resolution on the floor at this point. I'm going to open it to comments from Council. And then I will canvass Council as well for to put an option on the floor. But first, we're just going to start off with comments and questions. So I will open the floor, Council. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 questions to start and then a few comments. My first question is about the encroachment agreement, and I'm wondering, should this be approved by Council? Is it staff's intention to require an encroachment agreement for these proposed structures?
Go ahead, Clerk Thomas.
Thank you, Your Worship. To address the question, yes, that's the recommendation that we're proposing for the MOU. And since we have the MOU in place, and if this recommendation is approved, we would require an encroachment agreement to be executed.
Thank you. And my second question is for our treasurer. What are the reserve funds that the BIA has by way of a savings account, I guess, with our town?
Treasurer Quinlan. Oh, there you are. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I'm just actually pulling up the amounts right now. Just give me 10 seconds here. At the end of 2021, the BIA has just under $439,000 in their reserve account.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. I struggled with this one because there's everyone at this table for sure, including myself, wants our small businesses and our downtown to be so successful. I looked through all the reports that were referenced in our staff report. And there, I have to say, aside from a comment that the stakeholders believe that traffic could be diverted downtown if they knew the downtown was there, there is no evidence that would in fact be the case. We know from our master traffic study, there's thousands of cars a day through our peak AM and PM timeframes that are traveling straight through our town. And as I say, there's no evidence that I could see that an archway or anything else would divert that through traffic down to shop in our town. I appreciate that at the time that this process started, there was no public process that would have been required for our BIA to engage in. And so there wasn't a public process, and this is the first time now in March and into April, this has come to our council for review and consideration. And so it started before the $8 million investment that our town made in a judicial inquiry that tells us all the, in hundreds of recommendations, that transparency and accountability have to be at the forefront of major investments that this town makes. And I am of the view that this is a major project, maybe not financially, although this is a very expensive piece of infrastructure for our downtown when you compare it to the usual BIA infrastructure of the waste bins and the benches and so on. But it will be something that everyone will see. And is that the right vision for our downtown? I am on the side that we do need a visioning exercise, and I would say it should be more than for our downtown. It should also include the highway that runs through our downtown. And this is the root of the problem, really. I think the BIA is trying to address a 5-lane highway that separates our downtown from our waterfront. And it has a lot of impacts from it's just not very nice, to it's not that safe if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist wanting to cross it. So I think for me, a visioning exercise would take into account our downtown, but also our highway, and see if there's some way we can soften the impact of that highway. And I'm no designer, and I'm the first to admit it, but I think of, what if even we just had red brick connecting from, the waterfront down the main street. There's so many ways to, if, we were to consult with someone like Michael McClellan, who has been such an important historical architect, helping our town to achieve some of these things. So all to say, I am in favor of visioning exercise. It's just a little bit broader than staff's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. And I think a lot of us spent this past week speaking to a lot of people trying to explain, number one, that it is a BIA budget matter in terms of the finance. It isn't about the town being able to use the money somewhere else. But I have to tell you that most of the feedback that I received was from the perspective that for our entire history, you've been able, to look straight up the street to the end. And at one point there was a ship there. And so the input was that the archway would be plunk in the middle of that vision line. And, truthfully, I don't know how much it would really show up without some visioning and having an understanding as to how it would look from the Dairy Queen, say, or up, and does it block that sight of vision that people have been used to who have lived here for a long time. And, we have listed here a lot of engagement of stakeholders, but nowhere did we engage the people who own the downtown. So I think that the visioning exercise is important. And I guess my question through to the general manager, Nicholson, is partnering with the town. Does that mean just a 50-50 on the $20,000 cost? Or is that just in the process? If that could be clarified for me, please.
General Manager Nicholson.
Yes, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. I think we're talking about a couple of things. The complete visioning exercise, I think, is a longer term project. And absolutely, I think that is something that we need to look at in subsequent years. Are you talking about the $20,000 that's been quoted to come up with different designs, but that we would still move forward with the project?
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking that we would take one of those pauses that we've been required to do over much of this term to really respect the transparency and accountability we're so striving so hardly to achieve. That I guess in my head, I had it that visioning would pause briefly so that we could give the residents a specific amount of time to have some feedback and some clarity, because I just find, again, part of what our communication strategy that's coming up later, and this is that the information gets misstrued and misunderstood. And I find that one delivery of the information for everyone to consider at the same time in a factual manner and a visual manner, as opposed to a, just word of mouth. I just think a more educated approach would be good. So I guess the view I was looking to is that it would pause, that we would share a visioning exercise and getting it, and if it was deemed then by council that they could approve it, then we would get it going as quickly as we could. But I'll listen to the rest of my colleagues and see where we land. But I mean, clearly it's the BIA's money. We understand that. Even when our town budget goes through to suggest that it was provided to us through a budget, I would never challenge how the BIA membership wants to spend their money. But what I will do is represent, and I really like the changes that are proposed by staff here for the MOU, and I hope that you appreciate them as well. That will be really important, so this doesn't happen again going forward. That we don't somehow that step got missed, and it's a really important one.
Just a follow-up if
do
I
it.
could.
Yep, go ahead, General Manager. I think we need to clarify though between the options 3 and 4. There's the visioning and then some further public consultation, and there's a price
Yeah,
difference
and
there.
that's where I'm getting a little
Okay,
confused.
go ahead, please. Yeah.
And the other thing is though, I mean, the concept of the arch has been visually in every presentation we've made to council as part of our annual report since 2019. So the location, the concept of that arch has been in the public eye since 2019. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, maybe I'll look then to Clerk Almus, if you can just clarify the difference between options 3 and 4, please, Sarah.
Certainly, I think Councillor Jeffrey did touch on it on a good point. There is an option to combine a couple of these. So council could say, you know, let's proceed with getting different design concepts, then put it out to the public. And if the overarching, pardon the pun, overarching comments back are very negative or not positive towards proceeding with a different design, that would trigger the potential visioning exercise in 2023, or could even, which would again, you know, would be a significant project that would probably take the entire year. And we actually didn't identify, it would be much more than $20,000 for that. And then again, pending BIA's, you know, if they would like to participate in that project. But if from the additional concept designs, the public is extremely in support of proceeding with one of the new design concepts, that maybe council would consider pursuing it this year.
Okay, any follow-up, Councillor Jeffrey?
No, just to say that, I mean, I've had people who like it, I've had people who don't, and I've had people who, you know, some describe it as intrusive, some describe it as they just absolutely don't like it. And I just don't think I can get a proper handle on it without another step that would inform me comfortably just to say, absolutely, go for it. So thank you for those clarifications.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty next.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I want to start by saying I absolutely appreciate the extreme frustration that our BIA board must be feeling right about now. And Sue is smiling. And, you know, in a way, it's probably a good thing that this meeting is virtual, because otherwise we might be ducking rotten tomatoes. But that said, it is relatively rare in my experience where we would get such a resounding, mostly negative reaction to a proposal for the downtown. And I just can't responsibly ignore it. I think we do need to talk to our public. And I also want to commend the clerk with the recommendation that as part of this exercise that we would revise our MOU so that hopefully we never get into quite this situation again. My thought was absolutely, I did want to pursue a public consultation. In my mind, it was option 4, which was a relatively shorter, less involved consultation via Engage Collingwood. And I'm very glad to hear that the BIA are also suggesting that some additional concept designs would be explored, not just color alternatives, because in my view, I don't think that was going to cover it. And then at that point in time, if we get an overwhelming or at least a definitive feedback from the public that nothing that they're seeing is supportable, then I think we need to, or this would be my thought anyway, back off and revert to option 3, which would be a more fulsome consultation with the public, exploring not only gateway aspects, but so many other aspects of the design of our downtown and our waterfront. And those are my thoughts and and just one other thing, I would be supportive of splitting the $20,000 with the BIA just to do this shorter term, more immediate consultation with the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Council, other questions or comments? Councillor Carrier?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to my colleagues. First of all, I'd like the recommendation severed, please, so that we consider the middle recommendation and the third recommendation separately, because the third one has to do with the MOU and the other one has to do with the project as presented. So from my experience, whether we're talking about downtown murals, Grand Avenue for First Street, whether we're talking about the downtown revitalization project that we know is the beautiful renovation project that we did in the downtown core, all of those involved significant, and I mean significant, I mean, throw the sign bylaw in there, significant public consultation. And so I'm not here to feel like I should be assessing blame. It's a situation where a process or a step in this process has been missed. And I agree with my colleagues that the people who own the downtown weren't consulted. The people who have a significant investment in the downtown, not only the business owners and those who operate the businesses and those who own property in the downtown were consulted, but the public wasn't consulted. And so I don't support moving forward with this project as presented. I mean, we've had lots of emails and comments from the public and people out there with a significant investment in the heritage aspect of our town. And I'm going to look to Richard Lex's letter that's on the agenda tonight. I mean, there's somebody whose opinions I think that all of us respect. All of us have a strong respect for and regard for, and that even in those comments, they're saying, hey, there should have been more public consultation. The Heritage Conservation District Plan, I was part of those discussions back when, and so was Councillor Jeffrey, and I'm sure some of you other people, whether you were elected or not elected, were part of those discussions. And I mentioned this last time, like with the sign bylaw, they didn't like signs that hung over the main street. That was something that they didn't want done. And this is a permanent something hanging over the main street. And I don't mean that to sound as negative in the context that it's coming out. I like the fact that, somebody like Michael McLennan, who did comment on our Heritage Conservation District, or who has done peer reviews for us on heritage sympathetic design. I didn't see a report before that. So I'm not supportive of the recommendation as presented. Where I am willing to meet with the BIA on a discussion basis is that, hey, I don't think you should have to eat some of the costs. And I mean, in a $55 million operational budget and a $45 million capital budget, and I know that the third quarter reviews, there's always a whole bunch of surplus revenue that comes in from non-tax allocated revenue, that there's plenty of room to put the money aside and have that conversation separately and talk about all of us with an invested interest in our downtown, because we love this downtown in our town, and decide what is the best step forward. And so with all the respect that I have for the BIA, I'm sorry, a step has been missed in this process, that the public did not have a fulsome opportunity for discussion, and I can't support the middle recommendation. The MOU changes, I like that, but I also think it's stating the obvious. the town owns the downtown, the people own the downtown, and we are the town's representatives, either elected or appointed. We do have that privilege, and I'm certainly voicing my support for them in a stronger balance than I am for the BIA tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Council? Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, thank you. Mayor Saunderson, I just wanted to preface my comments by saying that those around the table know that I am the representative member for council on the BIA, but these comments are made on behalf of myself as an independent resident of the community and member of council, and not somebody in a position who is lobbying on behalf of the BIA. That said, I think that we've arrived in an unfortunate place this evening where the initial intent was to be something quite positive and something that could be quite celebrated. And the final piece to a long path as it relates to studies and a plan that's been put in place to enhance the wayfinding and to enhance the overall experience of our historic downtown. I think that we can debate public consultation ad nauseum. I can think of numerous examples within this community where there has been limited to no public consultation. I also can think of other examples where public consultation has been undertaken to great extent, where then the council of the day simply threw that public consultation out the window and went in a different direction. So I think it's very important to be very clear in terms of what you're asking people to comment on, how that comment will be interpreted, put into some type of report, and then moved forward so that people don't feel that they're just wasting their time or providing feedback on something that has an already completed outcome. And I think of a number of examples where that's happened in the past. Many of the public comments, and I say this with utmost respect, I think were unfounded comments. We have received a number of letters that I think have been well-founded, well-written, and speak to a number of points. But I think if you were to digest and to simply take into account many of the comments that were posted online as reactionary comments, they're unfounded and they're based on false information. Comments where people are indicating that money should be spent elsewhere aren't appropriate. It's not money to be allocated to another resource or another project. Where the monies are coming from out of town coffers is inaccurate and therefore inappropriate. The process in which we arrived at here today, could there be improvements made? Sure, there can be improvements made at every step of the way as it relates to any project. But at no way was there any intent to mislead, misrepresent, or come to a conclusion that would put the cart before the horse, which has been indicated here tonight. Which has been indicated previously before us tonight. I think that the Arch is up to interpretation. And I have said this before, and I'll say it again as an analogy. I like to think of myself as somebody who appreciates art. I'm not an artist. The group of 7 are arguably the most famous Canadian painters. I'm not particularly a fan. I appreciate their talent. I appreciate the significance that they've made to Canadian culture, but I'm a bigger fan of, say, a modern piece or modern uses of art. The irony being that I've got a piece behind me that is somewhat representative of the great group of 7 and the use of their color palettes. The point being is that there was consultation. Members of our various committees are members of the public. The Heritage Committee are members of the public. The museum staff and advisory committee are members of the public. The downtown BIA and their membership are members of the public. There has been consultation. Perhaps it hasn't been as broad as one would appreciate or was looking for. But there has been consultation. And the design itself has gone through several, to my knowledge, charrette changes to the one that we see today. And the design is one that is complementary to the heritage, and in fact has been approved by the Heritage Committee. I have taken issue with the Heritage Committee. That's well documented. But at the same time, I appreciate that they are champions and stewards of the downtown, and they've approved this. The design elements are meant to be reflective of the architecture and the infrastructure that is already in place within the downtown. It is designed and in place to provide as an entry and a gateway and as a wayfinding in a modern environment to both not only Hurontario going south, but to the water going to the north. I think, and one of the most unfortunate pieces of this is that the rendering that was first made public, and the word that I have heard from some, and it is in one of the pieces that was received tonight in correspondence, is the word Disney-esque. And I can appreciate that. But when you look at the rendering that was supplied and was used by a local newspaper and the rendering that is provided to us tonight, you can see that there's more intricate work in the brick, that the poles themselves match, as the general manager indicated, the light standards. There's flowers off of each side, etc. And I think that the design itself is much more in keeping and would be reflective not only of the street landscape, but the adjacent buildings, etc. Pardon me, and would be an overall enhancement and not a detraction as some have suggested. I'm not here to persuade. I'm here to just give you my feedback on what I think would be a nice addition to our downtown. Yes, I see the card, I hear the music. And I would appreciate, and I would like to put forward the option of moving forward with this as it was recommended previously to not only the original standing committee, but to our last meeting. So this has now been vetted twice. This will be the third time to allow the BIA to move forward with the program that they had envisioned with execution for this summer and with the opportunity to take a full advantage of grant funding that has been made available through the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I will come back when we get to the options. Are there any council members who haven't spoken yet who would like to speak? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I spent my weekend reading agendas and minutes of the BIA going back to 2018, and I like to thank this council for that opportunity. I would like to say that a couple of the assertions that have been made in this staff report don't completely align with my understanding of the facts. And because in addition to reading the agendas and minutes, I also spent some time watching the YouTube, the video of the meeting at which we ostensibly approved this project. And GM Nicholson spoke this afternoon or this evening, I guess, for 4 minutes and 15 seconds, outlining what this arch was about. But on May the 3rd of 2021, she spoke for 29 seconds about the arch. And contained within those comments were, we are exploring this arch with a hope to install it in 2022. Now, at that same meeting, we had a whole bunch of other stuff. Do remember this was 1 week after we had passed the ICBL. So you can forgive us if maybe we were distracted and didn't quite fully understand what was being proposed in that moment, in those 29 seconds. And especially considering we as a council have seen projects delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed again by COVID and by supply chain issues and all sorts of things, that when someone says we're exploring this option and we hope to have it installed in 2022, that there is a fairly solid dose of skepticism that might come with those words. We were watching, how long it's taken even for the loos out at Fisherfield to get built. It's been 3 years. So saying that we're exploring it and thinking that we want to do it, I must confess, I don't think it fully dawned on me that we were actually going to put a shovel in the ground and just how far along the process we were, especially when the word exploring was the word that was used. That being said, I am moved by what Deputy Mayor Hull has had to say regarding consultation. And so I came into today with an open mind, and I still don't know what to do here, because I like what Councillor Carrier has had to say regarding splitting or taking over so that and making whole the BIA if we decide to not do it. I think that that's only fair. Especially after the years that we've had, that our small business people have had, and the money that they've all lost. So, and I am like, I gotta say, I am so sorry that we got to a point where so many people's hair is on fire, and also we have frustrations. So, anyway, I would like to see some sort of a hybrid of options number 3 and 4. So let's hear from the people. Let's offer to make the BIA whole if it turns out that we don't do this. And let's consult, but let's do it in a timely manner so that if it is that the town goes, yay, we love this thing, why are you fighting over it? We can do it and take advantage of these federal dollars that are apparently sitting on a table, because I'm loath to send federal money back ever again. So that's where I stand. I feel like there's got to be some way to thread this needle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Any other council members who haven't spoken yet that would like to speak? Seeing none, I have a question and then some comments. And so I pose this to Clerk Almas or any other staff member that wants to jump in, including General Manager Nicholson. So when we look at option 4, how are we intending to weigh the results of the public consultation? Is there going to be in our public art forum, there's a committee that weighs the proposals and makes a decision. And if we end putting this to public participation, how are we going to weigh the results that we get so that council gets some objective information from that? Go ahead, Clerk Thomas.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. I think if council decides to go with option 4 and do a consultation with different design concepts, that information would be provided back to council, and then council will have to make a decision whether they wish to postpone the project and proceed with the visioning exercise, cancel it altogether. But one piece that I am interested in, and maybe the appropriate staff member to speak to, this is Director Culver. Maybe I'm putting him on the spot right now regarding the public art policy, and whether this fits into that framework and the framework that they utilize for items such as murals and the rhino statue.
Dr. Culver.
Thank you, Worship. I'm hesitant to connect this to our public art procurement policy, only because that policy has a prescriptive entry based on council direction, and then a bit of a prescriptive process when it comes to establishing an ad hoc committee and then following through. And then there's the other part of this, which is sort of identifying the Archway or this feature as an art piece, because under the definitions associated with the public art policy, it's not. There's a couple of reasons why not. One of the main reasons why is that it needs to be guided and led by an artist, by a professional artist. And so I think mechanically there's an opportunity to do a similar process. I would not call it the public art process, but striking an ad hoc committee and following some of the mechanical components of the public art process could be implied. However, like I say, there's just a lot of challenges to having this insert. It would degrade our process, which is actually a really good public art policy process, to sort of force fit this in when it doesn't meet any of the criteria, the establishment criteria, unfortunately. I'm not sure if that's helpful or not. Do the best I could with it, but thanks.
I appreciate your input, Clerk Almas.
Certainly, I just add on to that. So I do appreciate that clarification from Director Culver that I don't necessarily know if we know what the next steps would look like until we do receive that input from the public, and maybe we present once we get that information back. The information goes to council, you know, in somewhat of a unfiltered state, in which council says, you know, how they would like to proceed at that point. I'm hesitant if we, you know, defer the decision today to make sure that we put a process in place before we start or give the approval for the consultation on new conceptual designs, how much it's going to delay the project as well.
Okay, and I guess just as a follow-up question to General Manager Nicholson, that the funding from the federal government is, what's the window of access to that funding?
Well, I mean, the application was based on the studies that said we need this, and the anecdotal information we get from our businesses all the time that they need this type of thing. I'm in contract phase with them now. I understand from our MP that we're only one of two in his riding that receives this funding. I hesitate. It also has a lot of other components that is more than just the arch. So we have we are at risk of losing this. So I mean, I need to get back to them and find out from their staff perspective as to what kind of leeway we have. Is there an opportunity to do different things with this funding? I mean, we talk about having some sort of gateway feature at the south end. And I think with the Monaco development, I think the concept of an arch there is probably not appropriate. That could be something where a lot of public consultation could be received regarding, is it more of a gateway feature that is more art focused, that it could be, could be seen as an art installation. And then the other thing is improving or adding to the mural laneway that we've already done, doing laneway improvements in that public laneway adjacent to the Northwood, and improving the Discovery app, which the BIA and the town invested in, which is it ties in with the pedestrian signage through the QR code, but it's a much more mobile and platform that can reach the tourist market as they're here or as they're coming here. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't reached out to them. I'm sitting on an email from them with, this is a statement of work that we're looking at doing, but I don't know what that statement of work looks like. So,
right, I appreciate your answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's universal around the table that we find ourselves in a situation that, in my opinion, is in no way the fault of our BIA. They're a creation under the Municipal Act, and we created one, and their role is, their mandate is the beautification of the downtown core. And I think this falls within that mandate. So if there is a fault here, I think it is in the evolution of our relationship. The MOU is a new development with the BIA, but I think that that we around this table are the ones that are responsible for not having gotten involved in this decision earlier. So it is the point at where it's at, and I have a great deal of sympathy with the Deputy Mayor's comments. A great deal of time and effort has gone into this. This is not a new development, and I agree wholeheartedly that I've seen it come to council a number of times, but we missed the opportunity for important public involvement, and we've seen on many fronts that we've been working hard at getting our residents engaged, going back to the community-based strategic plan of 2015 and before that. So I think the fault rests with us at Town Hall, and my apologies to the BIA. And that being said, I think that this is an important feature for our community. It is an important part of our downtown. And I have concerns that if you open this up to a public consultation just on the design itself, you're not going to get a clear outcome. And so the decision may not be any different after that process. But that said, I stand behind the public process. And so for the purposes of today, I do not want to see us jeopardizing the funding so any more than is necessary to try and advance this parcel or this project. And my feeling is that if there are financial losses for our BIA, that the town should be recouping those losses for the BIA, since it is this council that is putting a stop to this process right now. So with that being said, I will go around the table looking for options. And the Deputy Mayor, you spoke, I am severing, based on Councillor Carrier's request, I am severing the options from the MOU adjustments. And so Councillor or Deputy Mayor, you wanted to put option 1 on the table?
That's correct, yes.
And do we have a seconder for option 1? I will second it just to get it on the table. We've had good discussion around the table. So with that being said, I will call the vote then. All in favor of option 1? And opposed? That is defeated. Who would next like to put an option? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So still going back to my suggestion of the hybrid, some way of just giving us a bit more time to run some kind of effective consultation with the public. And I'm really not sure creating new, I think we're probably past creating new designs, but I think at least to get a solid understanding of where they stand with what is proposed currently so that we can make a decision as to whether to approve it or not. So I don't really know how to word that. But the clerk did identify that it really wasn't one of the options. So it's kind of a hybrid. So I would look to her expertise as to how to word that properly.
Clerk Thomas?
Certainly, I think that what was being proposed, you know, it doesn't take the visioning exercise off the table in the future, but you're not able to make a decision until that's decided. So if you want to go with number 3 and do that, I think to speak to one of the questions as well was, does the consultation provide, you know, additional design ideas? Would require obviously the Heritage Committee's, you know, support prior to them being published, but it could also include a component that says, you know, not just do you like these 3, but do you like an archway at all? So they're not just picking one item if they don't support having an archway, and that's part of that consultation piece. And I'm not sure if the CAO has any further input on this.
CAO Skinner?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Jeffrey. I think what I heard you saying was we have some conceptual designs that are in hand today, and those are the items that public input could be sought on now. And I'm not sure that's the way that Clerk Almus had interpreted it in her response, but that's what I think I heard you say, which wouldn't preclude a future visioning exercise, which could be triggered under a different process. So that certainly could be a viable option to look at that. I did want to say one item related to public consultation, which is that the various options really are the BIA's options. And we have very much open to council the use of the Engage portal, the support of the communication staff, should you wish. But ultimately, the summary of that information, the recommendation of which option to go forward with based on the board's interpretation, I think should come from the BIA, and we'd be happy to support them as staff. But I don't think it is the town's options that are being reviewed and then recommended by town staff. Just simply because it is the BIA's money and the BIA's initiative that would be put forward to council for decision. So that's just a little element of if we go forward with consultation, how I think it should be presented from the BIA back to council after that process is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Any follow-up on that, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I do appreciate the CAO's comments and the clerk's suggestions. So I guess my proposal would be to proceed with or to ask the BIA to engage a full public consultation with the existing conceptual designs, and where one of the questions would be, I guess there's the three, but the fourth piece would be, are you opposed of an archway, period, and be able to get that input to help us going forward. And I guess I guess we're past being able to get a comment from the BIA in terms of that that hybrid suggestion, but I'll wait to see if there's a seconder and what my colleagues think.
And just before I get a seconder, there is a cost associated with that, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that, Councillor.
Well,
Go ahead.
I would agree that we need to assume the costs for that. I guess if the BIA wants to partner, I guess that's ideal, but if we need to assume it, then we would assume it.
And I'm just going to look, Clerk, almost you had your hand up when there initially.
Sorry, so the cost would just be associated with the engagement piece and the communication if we didn't pay the $20,000 to do the additional conceptual designs. Okay, just want a clarification.
All right, and GM Nicholson, do you any comments before I look for a seconder?
No, I just, I mean, I am concerned that, as you say, this arch has been in the public eye or in the council eye for many. The time to stop it, in my opinion, and I think the BI's opinion, would have been when we brought it to the table first. You know, we have, that's my concern. We've gone a long way down this road. And I appreciate your comments, Councillor McLeod, about the, that was a budget presentation we made. What we had done was we had taken money from reserve to begin the engineering phase of the project. But after discussions with town staff, it became quite evident that it would be a full contract, a turnkey operation that would be the most effective way to do it. And then we applied desperately for funding and grants to make it happen. And we were very fortunate in order to get them and to move forward. So it's a long process to suddenly have the public say we don't want it at all, because we know that it's been identified as a key component of the wayfinding and important for our downtown business community.
Thank you for that. So we'll look for a seconder on this, and then I'll be open to calendar. You've got requests to speak up. If you want to second it, just put up a yes, please. Okay, Councillor McLeod. Now, is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Doherty, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize, but I am looking for clarification here of Councillor Jeffrey's motion. I had understood that it was option 4, that we would put this option and perhaps some others in front of the public in using a short-term mechanism like Engage Collingwood. But what I think I'm hearing is Councillor Jeffrey suggesting that we should just go with a simple yay or nay with the current design and do not explore any other options. Which is it?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, through to Councillor Doherty. I think it was pretty clear through the CAO and the clerk that my view would be to go with the existing concepts, recognizing how far down the road we are. That it's the choice of the three that had been presented, plus the other option to say not in favor of an archway at all.
Okay.
All right. I think I had the deputy mayor next, and then Councillor Carrier.
Thank you. Through you to perhaps staff, if they could provide comment or answer the following. And it is to the very question of May. I'm not in favor, as I've already stated, in terms of the consultation, and I would be very much not in favor if there isn't additional information or clarity. If the question is posed simply as, are you in favor of an arch? I think that I could probably save some people some time. But if the question is posed with the facts as it relates to how we got here, why we're here, the importance, the studies that went behind delivering this piece of infrastructure to enhance our downtown, then I think it provides a broader, fulsome picture. And I think that there's great danger in asking the public, and I say this with the utmost respect, but if you ask, Prime Minister Mulroney, one of his greatest regrets, he would certainly refer to Charlottetown. If we were to base decisions on public opinion, we as 6 individuals would never have implemented the ICBL. But with all of the information at hand, we made a very difficult decision and we moved forward that particular evening. And yet, the 27 to 28 deputants that particular evening all spoke against why we should do something. So I just would ask through you, Mayor Saunderson, to staff that if we are going to articulate a question through Engage that asks to yay or nay, would it in fact be simply a yay or nay? Or would there be some context provided so that persons can make a decision based on that information? Thank you.
Thank you. Who from staff would like to take that question? CEO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Hull. Yes, typically, and I would think also in this case, if the public's being asked to weigh in, first off, we would try to provide in as clear a manner as possible the context. So the BIA would need to support us on that piece, but the underlying studies or any other information would be generally provided. And in the survey design, depending on what's decided this evening, there's a number of options available, everything from voting yes and no to unformed text and that kind of information. So if we desired comments or ratings from members of the public, those can absolutely be worked into the tool itself.
Follow up, Deputy Mayor.
I'll just say this and then I'll end it for the evening, and that is that I think it's clear I've already made my points both tonight and previously. So I'm not going to support what's being tabled momentarily, but I do appreciate the position that council's in, and I do appreciate the response that staff has given to the question. And I've made my position clear, but I will certainly respect the outcome. And if it's in the wisdom to engage, whatever that engagement will be, I certainly respect that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification back to staff. So the hybrid option that's being proposed, or the public consultation that's being proposed, is on the existing designs and not saying, no, we want to talk about new designs. And if that is the case, then I won't be supporting this recommendation, because I'll go back to the downtown revitalization project. And I know I misspoke the last time I talked about it. I said it was a $10 million project. It was a $7 million project, and $2 million came from the feds, $2 million came from the province, and $2 million from the taxpayers of Collingwood, and then an additional $1 million came from the BIA because we balanced those discussion with their needs against the town's needs, and they funded and put their, and they to use the phrase, they put their money where their mouths were to have a strong input into the design. Here, with you're talking about the wayfinding report, and it seems to me that it is one focus. I want to create more business coming to my business, and this is how I'm going to do it. Well, in that case, we wouldn't have bike lanes. We'd have a lot more drive-through restaurants. We'd have a heck of a lot more garish signage around the town than we currently do. I think it throws out the public consultation phase, which I spoke to earlier, and I'm okay with going with option 3, but also having a genuine discussion with the BIA that, hey, we need to put our money, the town needs to put its money where its mouths are, to say, look, let's just take a step back and do a consultation with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in favor of this option, and as attractive as it seems on the surface, what's weighing on me is something you said, Mr. Mayor. How, if I can paraphrase it, how do we know we're going to get a statistically, relevant answer? Because even if 1,000 people weigh in, it's such a small fraction of our voting public. And, really what it sounds like to me is we're saying, and I know we're out of time for this, like we should be putting it on the ballot at election time and letting everyone who votes weigh in, because I think Engage Collingwood is a useful exercise, and it does give us a feel of what our community thinks. But to say that we're allowing, however many hundreds or thousand, I don't think we ever had 1,000 people weigh in, but, letting them decide instead of us, it just seems like we're abdicating our responsibility. I think a visioning exercise, which I know, we'll come to next, at least it has the option of getting a sense of what people are feeling and what kind of image they want to see for the downtown, and having that kind of a discussion, and then maybe turning it over to people who can take that vision and turn it into something, we would say, oh yeah, that's it. I don't think with all respect to our deputy mayor, to me, the context of how this came about, and I'm so sorry also for how it came about, but the context isn't important to me when we know we're going to have something at our, on our street that could be there for decades, right? Like it's not, anyway. That's really what I wanted to say. And I think if the vote is that we just go and say, do you want an arch or not, we should be including the whole of the project. And I know the BIA hasn't come up with a design for the south end, and it's still up in the air, but they have applied for funds for it. So I think we have to be pretty upfront with our public at this time if we're going to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, council, on the option that's on the floor? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote then. All in favor?
I don't know. It's gonna die.
Opposed? So that is defeated by a tie. Is there another option somebody wishes to put on the floor? Councillor Hamlin, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to put on the floor the third option, which is the visioning exercise.
All right, do we have a seconder? Councillor Doherty. I don't know if it requires any further questions or comments, so I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? Hold your cards up. And opposed? So that is carried. All right, thank you very much, staff, for that presentation. Thank you, General Manager Nicholson. And good night. And Clerk Almus, if you can call back Councillor Madigan, we can get to item 6.2.
I believe you still have the severed portion of the memorandum of understanding to deal with.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Councillor. All right, so the second portion of the motion, which deals with the MOU amendments. Can you just put them back up on the screen, please, Sarah?
Stephanie, are you able to put up the last slide? I guess the second last one, maybe.
Yeah. All right, just leave that up there for a minute. So what I propose to do is get the severed portion of the motion, and it reads as follows: that council directs staff to amend the approval processes for the installation of the permanent infrastructure in the downtown within the memorandum of understanding between the BIA and Town of Collingwood as recommended herein. And if I can get a mover and a seconder for that, we can get it on the floor for discussion. Councillor Carrier and Councillor Hamlin, thank you. Questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote?
Looks like we'd lost Mayor Saunderson. I think Mayor Saunderson has exited and will be rejoining us. In accordance with the procedural bylaw, we can wait 15 minutes to try and regain the mayor's participation. Don't see him joining right now.
What's plan B?
Proceed in the absence of the mayor. I'm just going to quickly take a review of that section.
I was just kidding.
So it's in the event of a technical difficulty that a recess of not more than 10 minutes can be taken to allow staff to reinstate the electronic participation. If a member can no longer participate by electronic means, it will not affect the validity or continuation of the meeting or decisions. I'm just going to give Mayor Saunderson a call. The mayor has confirmed that his internet has went down and he is trying to reconnect, and he would like us to proceed until he's able to return. So Deputy Mayor Hall, if you would like to take over chairing.
Certainly. So on my screen, I got everybody with the exception of Councillor McLeod. Is Councillor McLeod with us? There she is. Okay. So we've got the severed portion here, and I apologize, I didn't catch. Did he ask for a mover and seconder? Yes. Okay. So it was moved by Councillor Carrier, and who was seconder?
Councillor Hamlin.
Councillor Hamlin, thank you. Any questions or comments before I call the vote? Yes, Councillor McLeod.
Just to be sure, this is on amending the MOU. It's been more than a hot minute since this happened, and we're all a little distracted. So just to be sure.
No, you're correct. That's what's being called. So that said, then I'll call all those in the affirmative. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Yes, Clerk Almas.
Certainly. Sorry for the interruption. I just want to recognize, I didn't know if since this is a hot topic tonight, if we should talk about compensation. So the BIA membership, $32,000 from their levy. They've already committed to that they won't get funds to cover that for. And if council wants to address that issue this evening or have decided a future date or leave it at coming out of the BIA's funds.
I have a suggestion, but Councillor McLeod, go ahead.
My suggestion would be that, as I said in my comments, that we make the BIA whole. It appears as though this project will be delayed for at least 2 years. And I think that especially now, in light of 2 years of COVID restrictions and the massive losses that businesses have suffered, that we should do what we can. And my question as well, I think maybe to our treasurer would be, is maybe there's some COVID money that we can use to cover this. I don't know.
I'm just going to interject. Treasurer Quinlan, before you respond, good question. Mayor Saunderson is back online with us. Mayor Saunderson, we have passed the second part of the resolution as it relates specific to the MOU. We're now having a conversation as it relates to making whole the BIA, the amount that was already spent, 32,000 and change. So that's where we're at, and I'll turn the chair back to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My apologies to everyone. Hopefully I won't go down again. And over to you, Treasurer Quinlan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. At this time, all the COVID money or Safe Restart money that we received from the province and the feds has been fully allocated. So there isn't any amounts remaining. Now, that's not to be said. There has been a little bit of chatter in the background in the grants world that it's possible there may be some additional funding given the situation that's occurring right now, but we don't know anything for sure yet. So we haven't been allocated anything yet.
Councillor.
Yes, thank you. And just for my clarification, it's not I'm just thinking through the things that I know about how this works, and it seems to me that it's not individual individual business owners that pay those levies anyway. It's the owners of the buildings, isn't it? Or is it? I can't.
Treasurer Quinlan, would you have that information?
It does go to the property owners themselves. I think oftentimes they may include that. Sorry, I see Sue has come up here as well. Sue.
Yeah.
I can speak to that. The assessment is against the property owner. However, it is passed on through the tenant through either a net or a gross lease as part of the TMI that a tenant would pay. So yes, the businesses pay the levy.
Yeah, and so I 6 of one and half a dozen. So I will make a motion and further that, or an amendment to the main motion, and further that the Business Improvement Association or Downtown Business Improvement Association be compensated for or reimbursed for the expenditures that have been outlaid to this time for this project. Period.
And I'm sorry, I missed a part of the main motion that you're referring to.
So is item 6.1 that we receive the report, and that we go with item number 3, and that we change the MOU, and then this would be in addition to that.
Okay. And I missed the vote, but as we severed it initially, I would have thought that those portions of the motion had been dealt with. So perhaps this is a separate motion relating to that.
This would be a separate motion because we did sever those. Thank you.
So I'll just look to Clerk Almas to clarify.
So certainly we could have at the time when the motion went forward to approve proceeding with the visioning exercise, noted an amendment to make that any lost compensation that the BIA has invested in this be reimbursed. So I think that this would be in order to include in today's agenda. I think it would help to go to any of the discouraged frustration feelings that the supporters of the Arch may have, if council feels that they're comfortable in entertaining that tonight. So we can do it, since it wasn't an amendment to the original one, we can just do a waiving right now, get 2/3 to support waiving notice of motion and proceeding with it. I think that's probably the cleanest approach.
All right, so we have a notice of motion, and we will look for a 2/3 majority to waive notice of motion to deal with it tonight. All in favor? And I think that's unanimous. So thank you. I guess just maybe to plug that hole, I'll have that moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Deputy Mayor. So then go ahead, Councillor McLeod, put your notice of motion on the floor, please.
Well, I can't remember what I said 7 seconds ago. About that the Downtown Collingwood BIA be compensated for monies expended on the Downtown Archway project in light of the postponement and visioning exercise that is to take place.
All right, thank you. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Hamlin. Any questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote? Councillor Carrier, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Can there be a clarification on the dollar figure, please?
Yeah.
Are we talking about the $32,403, or are we talking about something else?
Nope.
32,000 is part of it, but I'm not sure that's all of it. I maybe would look to General Manager Nicholson to see if there's other expenditures that is above and beyond that number.
No, that's the fee that we received, or the estimate we received from the contractor who was we contracted with to do this project. That would be what's been incurred to date. Any cancellation fee for the contract, I think he's been very generous with his cancellation fee. He's not charged us a lot. It doesn't take into account the volunteer time, staff time, and in putting together the project and applications for grants. But anyway. But that's the hard cost for the project cancellation.
Okay, thank you for that. A follow-up, Councillor Carter?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That does clarify. And I mean, I fully expect as option 3 is explored in discussions between staff and BIA and council, that we will have, to use the phrase, skin in the game, which means money. And that will be a discussion down the road. But for the immediacy of tonight, I do appreciate and will support the $32,403 payment.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'm just trying to gather my thoughts because I don't want to be in a position where I'm asked to leave the meeting. But I'm angry at myself, and I'm angry at what we've done tonight. We were in a position to move forward, or we were in a position to take a step back. And we're now looking at taking multiple step backs and forking over $32,000 of townspeople's money to the BIA. So I'm angry at myself because when we called that vote that was tied at 4, if I had just voted the other way, I'll say it, swallowed my pride, we would have moved on with a public session and come to some type of conclusion. And yet now we're going to go into something that I think is well, I don't know. You know, I probably best leave it there. But in my 7 years at the council table, there are very few evenings where I've been angry at myself. And this will take the cake. I'm pretty damn angry.
Certainly 2 components. I think before we consider this, we have to make sure we have some funds available. So I appreciate the treasurer coming on board here, but a potential another option would be that the BIA, since that money was coming from their reserve anyways, should the visioning exercise that concludes at the end of 2023 not support an arch, or it doesn't look like it, maybe is that the better time frame when council considers whether they should be compensated or not?
Okay, I thank you for that input. I think what I'll do first is go to Treasurer Quinlan, and then based on that answer, I will go back to the mover and for her position.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Clerk almost did bring it up, is that, you know, we would need a funding source. I don't particularly like the idea, unfortunately, to push it out to 2023. And then if the visioning exercise came back, just because, you know, staff changes and life changes and there would be lots of discussion at that point. So, I mean, we obviously don't have it in the budget for 2022. But I think we do have a corporate contingency account if council would support that the funding come from there at this time. And should, you know, some other event occur that, you know, those funds are generally used for, we could always, you know, look to reserves or come up with a different funding allocation at that point. But it seems to me that the corporate contingency fund would be the right place for it at this point.
Thank you, Treasurer. With that information, I will look to the mover, Councillor McLeod. Any change in your direction on this? You're muted.
No, with the information that the treasurer has provided, that I think that will suffice.
All right.
I don't have a seconder yet.
I will look for a seconder. Councillor Doherty, yeah. Actually, I might have had Councillor Hamlin in there initially, but anyway, we've got it moved and seconded twice now. So unless there's any other questions or comments, council, I'm going to call a vote then. All in favor? And opposed? So noted. And that is carried. All right. Before I leave this, finally, I'm going to look around the table and make sure that I'm actually, we've covered everything we needed to cover, and we're now prepared to move on to the next item. So go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
In light of what I just said and the fact that I voted in the negative to that prior vote, at a future meeting, I will bring it back for notice of reconsideration.
Okay. And so I will look to the clerk to please bring back Councillor Madigan, and we can proceed to our next item. All right. So next item is the Lobbyist Registry report for 2021, and I know that we have Manager Truman here, but I'm going to ask Clerk Almas to introduce the item, and Manager Truman, please.
Thank you, Worship. And I'll just let Manager Truman take it away and provide the annual update on the Lobbyist Registry program for 2021.
Thank you, and the floor is yours, Manager Truman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Clerk Almas. We can start on slide 2, please. So just a little bit of background. In January of 2020, Council voted to establish the Lobbyist Registry, making Collingwood the first municipality of our size to have a lobbyist registration program. By enacting this bylaw, Council established the requirement to receive an annual update on lobbyist activity within the town. And then more recently in July, I beg your pardon, of 2021, Collingwood retained the services of an independent lobbyist registrar as recommended in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. Next slide, please. So some helpful definitions. What is lobbying? So lobbying means any communication with a public office holder by an individual who is paid or who represents a business or financial interest with the goal of trying to influence any legislative action, including development, introduction, passage, defeat, amendment, or repeal of a bylaw, motion, resolution, or the outcome of a decision on any matter before council, a committee of council, or a staff member acting under delegated authority. And who can be lobbied? So this falls under the definition of a public office holder in accordance with our bylaw, which would be a member of council, an officer or employee of the town in a management position or with decision-making powers, or who have direct contact with council, committee, or a local board, a member of a local board or committee established by council, employees who work on municipal elections in a supervisory role, an accountability officer, including but not limited to the integrity commissioner, the lobbyist registrar, the ombudsman, and closed meeting investigator. Individuals providing professional services to the town during the course of providing such services. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, just a couple more helpful definitions. We consider 3 different types of lobbyists. So that would be a consultant lobbyist, which is an individual who lobbies for payment on behalf of a client, an in-house lobbyist, an individual who is an employee, partner, or sole proprietor, and who lobbies on behalf of their own employer, business, or other entity, or a voluntary unpaid lobbyist, which is an individual who lobbies without pay on behalf of an individual business or any other for-profit entity for the benefit of the interest of the individual business of the for-profit entity. Next slide, please. We are going to be recommending a few small updates to the bylaw just to keep it accurate and up to date. With the program having been running for 2 years, staff have noticed a couple of small things that we think would improve the system. So number 1 would be the lobbyist registrar definition should be updated to reflect the position is no longer a town staff person, but rather an independent appointee. Also, new language which should be included in the responsibilities of public office holder to state the importance of encouraging potential lobbyists to register or to register the action or to reach out to staff or the lobbyist registrar for assistance. And then finally, a new item under the responsibility of a public office holder section, which instructs that staff will be required to report a history of lobbying activity in their reports to council on any given subject. Next slide, please. So here are some of the stats for 2021 and as they compare to 2020. As I note here, we've only had the program live for 2 years, so we don't really have any trends to report yet, but the town did see an increase in lobbying activity from 76 individual actions to 87 in 2021. And interesting to note, the number of lobbyists that are registered actually decreased from 72 to 66 from 2020 to 2021. And then some on the next slide, please. Some additional comparable stats. So this is just breaking down the types of lobbying that we're seeing. So in 2020, we noticed that in-house lobbyists went down from 44 to 38, but consultant lobbyists increased from 29 in 2020 to 31 in 2020. In 2020 to 31 in 2021. And voluntary unpaid lobbyists increased from 3 in 2020 to 18 in 2021. Next slide, please. So in 2021, the popular subjects that were lobbied were development planning was the largest, followed by IT, and then Parks and Rec, and environment, and then transportation, and then everything else smaller than transportation, so smaller than 5 items, fall into the 23 category. And the next slide, please, just shows where the lobbyists who are registered, where they are located. So the majority are local from the town of Collingwood, but as you can see, we do have a number from Southern Ontario and Toronto and Guelph. And just interesting to note, we had 8 lobbyists registered from outside of Ontario, but still within Canada, and 5 lobbyists from outside of Canada. And then just next slide, please. And so just for final considerations, throughout the year, town representatives have continued to communicate that transparent, publicly registered and appropriate lobbying is a normal municipal process, and that those lobbying can advocate for positive change in our community. And town staff will continue to support showcasing programs like this and many other in the future. Any questions?
Thank you, Manager Truman. We'll look to clerk almost to see if there's anyone in our audience who would like to speak to this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, those attending this evening, which to speak the report, please press the raise your hand feature. There's no interest at this point, Your Worship.
Thank you. So I'm going to read in the resolution. It reads as follows: that staff report C 2022-16 2021 annual lobbyist register report to council be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman, Councillor Doherty. Council, questions or comments? A very thorough report, self-explanatory, and thank you very much. It's good to see that our lobbyist registry is active and ongoing and encouraging open and transparent lobbying in our municipality. That being said, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Manager. And this brings us then to item CCS 2022-5 Communications Division Plan. And I will turn it over to Manager Carter.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Thank you for having me this evening. Just wait till my presentation comes up. Okay, so the purpose of this report and presentation is to respond to Council's questions posed during the 2022 budget discussions, when a secondary staff position in the Communications Division was requested to meet ongoing and increasing demands on the division. The communications position was approved contingent upon council endorsement of a supporting communications plan. The report outlines the communications division plan that is the culmination of the feedback received through consultations with council and with department heads, as well as comments gathered from the employee engagement survey. Staff hosted consultation sessions with individual council members to seek their vision for the future of communications for the town, which included a thorough SWOT analysis. Department heads reviewed and provided input on the plan, and staff report, and also participated in group workshops, also conducting on top of the council input on the SWOT analysis, but from an internal and process perspective. Next slide, please. So you can see this house looks a little bit different than what was presented to council in your individual sessions, but just to keep things accessible. So the communications division plan is built on a house model, and the house model components are that the vision for the division acts as the roof of the house, the transformational goals and their associated action items act as the pillars or structure of the house, and it's all built on the foundational elements, which are the strategic plans and policies. The information gained through the consultation sessions was analyzed for prominent themes, which were then translated into an overarching vision for the division and transformational goals that align with communications best practices and corporate goals and objectives. Next slide, please. The guiding vision, ensuring an informed and engaged community through proactive communications and a variety of public engagement opportunities with council. Next slide, please. This is going to be a mouthful. The transformational goals are color-coded, green for community-based and blue for internal. The first is ask the community what they want. This is the first step in the division plan that will continue to inform and influence all the other transformational goals. An engagement will be carried out with the community to better understand the ways in which the community wants to receive information, be engaged, and participate in local government. It is anticipated that the engagement would be carried out in the second quarter of this year, followed by a statistically significant community survey in early 2023 per the community-based strategic plan. The next goal is be a trusted source with timely information, which includes action items on providing opportunities for media to engage with council and senior staff, issue more news releases and social media posts on significant topics for the community or things that may be misunderstood, emphasizing accurate information, better inform council members on key issues, implementation of a customer service module to track responsiveness to inquiries. This is a customer service item, but we thought it would be best to still list it here as it's closely tied with communications. Update the town's social media policy, platforms, and approach, ensuring ongoing alignment with the town's desire for providing a respectful forum for fact sharing. And finally, a website redesign is slated for 2023. You will see that in the budget discussions this fall to ensure greater streamlined access to information with what the community wants to see. The third community goal is provide authentic and impactful two-way engagement with the community. Action items under this goal include review the Engaged Collingwood platform and tools used with the project pages to ensure a robust approach is supported by best practices that is user-friendly and practical to implement. The second action item under this goal is to provide a quarterly opportunity for council to engage with the community, considering both in-person and virtual options. The internal goals include improve visual materials and improve internal processes. Under improve visual materials, action items would include hiring or procuring graphic design expertise, increasing the use of video content to share exciting stories, and make educational content more interesting. And finally, setting consistent branding across all town-owned and operated media supported by accessible templates and guidelines. The second transformational goal is to improve internal processes. This one was quite a big one, so it's divided into two streams of action items. The first being set to implement an intentionally collaborative and aligned corporate communications approach across the entire organization, including introducing guidelines for appropriate levels and times of communication or engagement for significant projects, implement a streamlined procedure for communications approvals, develop a communications collaboration committee, MOU, spanning all departments and including the library. The second stream of improving internal processes is the delivery of communication consultation services to departments, including identification of large and significant projects that warrant a plan for community information and or engagement. Including consultation and collaboration with community groups and other levels of government where appropriate. and provide support to departments to develop products and content, including layout and graphic design, and provide training to managers, department heads, and select staff to ensure implementation of this plan. All the timeframes listed within the plan you'll see in the report assume the recruitment and hiring of the communications coordinator after council's endorsement of this plan. Next slide, please. The foundational elements, the four of which are cited in the report, are the community-based strategic plan, the corporate communications protocol, and community engagement strategy, and use of social media policy. You will note that one of the action items within the plan is to update the social media policy, platforms, and approach to ensuring ongoing alignment with the town's desire for providing respectful form and back sharing. Next slide, please. So the plan is designed to support overarching goals and objectives as identified in the community-based strategic plan, while being specific enough to ensure accountability and transparency in the plan's execution. It's a positive step towards supporting the achievement of the town's objective of transparent and accountable local government, including enhanced public trust. The additional staffing resource moving forward will be an integral contributor to the implementation of the plan and will provide much needed capacity for me as the manager to focus on the identified transformational goals and other responsibilities as noted in Appendix A of the report. To meet the expectations of a growing community with a desire for more public engagement, increasing open and transparent communications from the town, which in turn results on an increasing list of priorities and additional resource, will be instrumental in the evolution of the communications division. So pending the committee's support of the communications division plan tonight, the intention is to begin advertising for the communications position immediately with a disclaimer that the position is still subject to council approval. Last slide, please. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Clerk Almus, I wonder if anyone in our audience would like to speak to that report.
Not at this time, Your Worship.
All right, well, then I'll read the recommendation and get it on the floor. So the recommendation is that staff report CCS 2022-5 communications round bracket division and bracket plan be received, and that the communications division plan as presented be approved. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Doherty. I'll open the floor to questions. Comments or questions, Council? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Saunderson, to Manager Carter, thank you so much for taking the time to make us understand what was before us. I imagine during the budget discussions, you had a couple of gulps when this was put forward, and we did put a lot on your plate, asking you to do this work, to explain what it is that you do and that needs to be done. And in an age of misinformation, I think that it is more important than ever that you have some support. So I will be happy to support receiving this report. I also want to ask you a question, because I think this is an important thing to be made public. Is that you currently spend a fair amount of time swatting away trolls and sea lions. Is that the case? And for any of the boomers who need sea lion explained, I can do that for you.
Through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor McLeod, I spend some time. I try not to spend too much time there. I'm just following the social media policy as we have it. As mentioned, that is one of the action items that still needs to be reviewed. Its current iteration was 2016. Some things have changed since that time. I'd like it to be a little bit more robust, so that will come before you in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Manager Carter. This is a huge and impressive portfolio. And I'm just wondering, is it consistent with a similar position in other municipalities? Because to me, it seems almost too big.
Manager?
Through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Doherty, I'm trying to think back to when the budget request came in. I reached out to all of the Simcoe and Muskoka district municipalities, and the ones that got back to me, I'm thinking off the top of my head now, I believe, well, Town of Blue Mountains has 5. Barrie had 9 plus 2 contract. So it's quite a range. Muskega Beach only does have 1. So it's a range across the municipalities, but everyone has different products and different priorities. So it's hard to say, but we definitely need to start with at least 1 more staff to continue on the track that we're going.
Follow up, Councillor?
Yeah, so maybe I'll ask it another way. Can 2 people accomplish all of this?
Through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Doherty, are you speaking, sorry, to the division plan specifically?
No, the job description, or the job description of the manager of public relations and communications, or the activities in which they would be involved.
Well, the manager job description is my job description. That's what it already is. But by having this secondary person on board, the things that aren't being accomplished right now, I haven't been able to come to council with, statistics and things like I'd like to do more regularly, and more strategizing. I think having that secondary person is the first step, at least, to alleviate some of that work and have this person focus on a bit more of the day-to-day, the social media management and those sorts of things, so I can strategize, plan more for the future, get those key messages out. Hopefully there'll be less information, less misinformation out there in the world.
Thank you. New respect, Manager Carter. That's a big job.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I really like the communication plan, and I really like the effort and the engagement that was put into developing it. I do note here in the staff report that the intention is to begin advertising immediately without council approval. I'd be curious to know what skill sets we're going to be advertising with that position, and is there any focus on the intergovernmental part or responsibilities of this this division, because that's a big piece of it, and that would be through the CAO. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson.
Okay, we'll start off with CAO Skinner because that question was directed to you, and then I will go back to Manager Carter.
Thank you, and through you to Councillor Jeffrey. There is in the report an appendix that sets out the skills that we're looking for between the 2 positions. So the manager position is Manager Carter, and the new position would be a subordinate position called the communications coordinator. So those are all set out, and in preparation for this, assuming and still very open to council's input, we have prepared a job description and had that assessed so that we could move forward quickly with the posting if the decision tonight is would support that. So I can flip to the, I could ask Manager Carter to walk you through the specific skills of the new position if you would like. But just before I receive the response on that question, the focus on the intergovernmental piece, I believe we moved to a different job description, which is the executive assistant to the CAO. So that would be Shelby Verkent at the moment. So that position has been reaching out for items related to our UEF and UN pieces and providing support where needed. But I could pull up and circulate separately to the council members or reply at a subsequent meeting on the job description items related to the intergovernmental piece as well, if you'd like. Thank you.
There's 2 aspects to that. So I'll go back to Councillor Jeffrey. Is there any follow-up on the intergovernmental relations position?
No, I appreciate that. If I overread where it said that parts of our communications consultation have been moved to other departments, I apologize for that, but I did not see reference to that. Okay. So no, I think it's pretty clear here, communications coordinator now. I just really wanted us to bolster some of the areas that were identified in our consultation. So as long as we're confident we're doing that, that's great.
Manager Carter would like to add something. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Member Saunderson, to Councillor Jeffrey. And further to what CAO Skinner said, what you might have read in there, Councillor Jeffrey, too, is that I fully emphasize within our social media, once we start reviewing their channels and things like that, they're having more robust plan to follow and engage with the different levels of government and making sure that we're sharing information. Currently, we do share. I follow County Simcoe every day. I check their sites, but we need a better process. So it's not just me checking it every day, something that we more legitimately follow all the different related agencies and levels of government. So that's maybe where you saw that. So we did hear that in the consultations, and that is taken into account.
Through you, Mayor Saunderson. Thank you very much, Manager Carter, for that response and clarification. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments, Council? Communications is definitely a growing portfolio and an increasingly important portfolio. And so as echo some of Councillor Doherty's comments, this is an ambitious plan, and I look forward to it being carried out and with the new hire. And thank you for the report today, Manager Carter. So that being said, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? And I think I'm just going to call opposed just in case I miscounted and missed anyone. No, that was unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us then to item 7, the consent agenda. And the resolution reads that council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 7.1, various BIA entrance archway correspondence. 7.2, Town of the Blue Mountains, South Georgian Bay Regional Pandemic Recovery Communications Task Force. And 7.3, ACE cabs, financial relief, and taxi fare increases. Looking for a mover and a seconder just to get to receive the consent agenda, and then I will look for items to be pulled, including the potential motion in item 7.3. So Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the vote to receive the general consent agenda. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Are there items to be pulled, Council? Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
7.2, please.
Okay. All right. So it looks like 7.2 is the only item to be pulled, and I would like to speak to that as well. But go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, and through you to the CAO. This is a proposal for a regional task force comprised of staff, and I'm just wondering how the CAO has received this and what thoughts she might have as to our participation and who might be designated, or even if there's time for it.
CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. I did have the opportunity of a conversation with CAO Everett from Town of Blue Mountains recently, and he explained, which is relatively well laid out in the letter in front of you, that they're looking to increase the communication between the two health units, being Grey Bruce and Simcoe Muskoka, our own economic development staff, and the communications that are put out to the public and to our businesses moving forward. So I was generally thinking we would nominate our manager of economic development, Brennan Kenny, and our communications manager, Krista Carter, pending their availability. And I haven't talked to their directors yet to confirm, but I was looking at this as 3 or 4 hours of time spread out over 3 or 4 months. So I didn't think it was an onerous task, and probably a good thing to do moving forward. It is a bit unusual to mix the political staff and the staff, but I think that we've seen it work in different places, and it can work here as well. You'll notice the chair is one of the members of the Town of Blue Mountains Council. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Follow, Councillor.
No, thank you. That's great.
Okay. I'd also speak to this item. As you know, we've put together the regional mayors and CAOs forum for information sharing to make sure that we're working together in areas that we can, and we've identified a number of areas where we can. I would speak to this item in particular when we were coming out of the first wave. our Dev department did a lot of work about shopping protocols and codes of conduct for people visiting Collingwood, as well as our stores in Collingwood, and that was very well received, and it was done by multiple municipalities. However, when we first put the information out there, a number of the other municipalities that hadn't percolated up to their councils. So I think that this is a good initiative to make sure that we are working together regionally to make sure that all municipalities are sharing similar practices or have the opportunity to share similar practices. So I would be in favor of this. And so I think they mentioned in the letter that they would look for respective councils to endorse participation by their staff. And so my understanding from my discussion with Clerk Almas is that that could be put on as a notice of motion today, and it would be dealt with at our April 19th meeting. So Councillor Doherty, if you'd like to move that motion or put that notice of motion on the table, all right, then we will deal with it at our April 19th meeting. Are there any other comments on that item on the consent agenda? Seeing none. That brings us then to departmental updates, and 8.1 is the OOT appeals update. Director Valentine. Councillor Doherty, you have a question?
Yes, Your Worship. 7.3, there was a motion attached to that correspondence.
Is only a motion if somebody pulls it and puts it on the floor, Councillor.
Oh.
So if you'd like to put that on the floor.
Yes, I would.
The motion. Otherwise, it's just part of the consent agenda.
Yeah, my apologies. Yes, I would want to put that on the floor. Would we treat that as notice as well? Clerk Almas?
I'm going to look to Clerk Almas. I think what happens is because it's included in the agenda, it can be voted on tonight, but it would be ratified at our next meeting since this is a committee. So if you'd like to put the motion on the floor, Councillor, now's your opportunity.
Yes, Your Worship. I would move support for this resolution here. I have, for many years now stated that, as the whole rideshare phenomenon evolves, I believe that our traditional taxis are a bit at a bit of a competitive disadvantage. And with COVID over the past 2 years, I can't imagine that it's been any better. So I would be very supportive of reducing their rates, as they have suggested here, 50% for the previous 2 years. And also that they be permitted to adjust their fee structure. Again, it is recommended up to 20% increase in the motion. I would think that if they wanted to remain competitive, that we wouldn't see an increase anywhere near that, but we would certainly put that in their court. And again, this is acknowledging that business, as many others, are still in process of recovering from COVID.
Right. So I will look for, well, perhaps I'll read the notice in just so everyone's clear. So whereas the current taxi fare rates are prescribed by the municipality and are only adjusted annually by the Consumer Price Index, which does not keep up with industry insurance costs or fluctuating fuel prices, be it resolved that council permit ACE cabs the flexibility to adjust their taxi fare rates to not exceed 20% of the town established rates, and the council grant 50% relief from the 2021 and 2022 annual taxi license renewal fees, and that the fee structure and fares be included in the upcoming taxi ride sharing license staff report. That's moved by Councillor Doherty. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Hamlin. Councillor, are there any questions or comments on this motion? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'd like to ask a procedural question to either of yourself or the clerk. We've voted to receive the 3 items. And I'm just wondering, by receiving these 3 items, would this motion, if it had not been pulled, been moved forward to the council meeting and could have been pulled at the council meeting at that time?
Put that through to Clerk Almas. Go ahead, Sarah, please.
Certainly, generally the staff can put in a consent agenda, a motion regarding the items, and it is voted on here and ratified at the council meeting.
Yeah, I think the deputy mayor is just wondering, had it not been pulled at this committee meeting, could it have subsequently been pulled at the council meeting?
Yes, it could. It could be with a notice of motion.
Any follow-up, deputy mayor?
Yes. I would be in favor of voting in favor to move this to the council meeting so that I would have an opportunity to maybe perhaps in the next 2 weeks or a week, 2 weeks, whatever, to ask a couple of questions of clarification. I know that cab licensing fees, et cetera, have been before us on several occasions. So it's not a new issue, but I certainly would just like that opportunity. And if so, then I think I would be in a better position to vote one way or the other on the actual motion as it is written.
All right, well, I guess that would be a request to defer the vote and not vote tonight, but to defer the notice motions on the floor, and will come up at the next council meeting if we defer it. So I think you've put a request to defer, Deputy Mayor. So I will look for a seconder for that request, Councillor McLeod, and I will call the vote then. All in favor of the deferral? And opposed? So noted. So Councillor Doherty, your notice of motion will be on the council agenda for the April 19th meeting, but it won't have the vote of this committee. It'll just be, it's been deferred by this committee to come up at the April 19th meeting to allow others and the deputy mayor to get additional information they feel would be necessary to vote on the motion.
Thank you.
All right, and then that brings us then to 8.1, the OLT appeals update, and Director Valentine is joining us. Go ahead, please, Summer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to members of council. We do have 2 OLT updates for you today as part of my remarks. The first is related to 31 Huron Street, which is otherwise known as the Harbour House Appeals of Non-Decision for a zoning bylaw amendment and a site plan application. This matter was last discussed in camera for council direction on March 28th of this year. The town solicitor has advised that it is appropriate to publicly share tonight that the case management conference for these hearings, which is scheduled for April 5th, tomorrow, is to be converted to a settlement hearing. The participants to the appeal were advised of this update late last week. And as a reminder, the Ontario Land Tribunal hearings are indeed open to the public. And if there is anyone who is observing or listening to the meeting tonight and you are interested to attend the OLT hearing tomorrow virtually to observe the proceedings, you can certainly reach out to the case coordinator, Ryan Coe, last name spelled C-O, at ryan.co@ontario.ca, and he will provide you with a link to that meeting. As a further reminder, when a land use planning application is appealed, unless the appeal is withdrawn, it is the tribunal who renders the decision on the matter in consideration of the evidence which is advanced by the parties and participants. And that holds true whether it's a settlement hearing or a full hearing. And the OLT, or Ontario Land Tribunal, must, through its decision, confirm that the proposal represents good planning. The second update that we have with respect to the OLT does follow along with CAO Skinner, earlier presentation, but bears repeating in case there are some latecomers to the meeting that missed her earlier remarks. We have received 3 appeals to zoning bylaw amendment 2022-007, and that was one of the tools recommended through the land use planning policy study to address municipal servicing capacity. 2 of the appeals were on behalf of landowners that had received exemptions to the interim control bylaw. So until all 3 of these appeals are either withdrawn or disposed of through the Ontario Land Tribunal, the ICBL will be automatically extended under the Planning Act, effectively continuing the development pause. It is the town solicitors and staff's intention to bring recommendations to council based on legal and technical advice to determine the next steps once we have a better understanding of the scope and nature of the appeals. And to do that, we are currently meeting with the appellants on a without prejudice basis to gain such an understanding. We are highly cognizant that further uncertainty resulting from these appeals and the extension of the ICBLs is difficult for the development community, businesses, and the public at large. And we are aiming to provide professional advice to council as soon as possible with a target date of later this month. Thank you, Your Worship. That concludes the Ontario Land Tribunal updates this evening, and happy to answer any questions that are appropriate to do so in open session.
Thank you, Director Valentine. Council, questions or comments on the OLT appeals report? Seeing none, thank you very much, Summer, and we look forward to hearing back on the status of the appeals and that extend the ICBL, and hopefully those can be dealt with. Thank you. And that brings us then to 8.2, the mayor temporary leave of absence next steps. And I'm going to hand that over to Clerk Amos, please. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a brief little flow chart that I will share with council. I know that I've had a few questions regarding what the expectation is now that you've announced your leave of absence effective April 20th. So if we go to the first slide. So basically, this is what we're looking at. We will be adding a nominations section on the April 19th meeting of council. This is where council will decide who will act in the absence of the acting mayor and acting deputy mayor. And this is the process, the same as we do for election of the standing committee chairs. April 20th is the official date that you've noted will be your leave of absence, I believe, at noon. So effective 12:01, the deputy mayor will assume the acting mayor duties. Councillor MacLeod assumes the acting deputy mayor duties. Councillor Madigan assumes the county councillor alternate. He's already been sworn in, and this is consistent with the county councillor alternate bylaw. And the council member elected to act in the absence of the chair to assume responsibilities, again, in the absence of the deputy mayor and Councillor MacLeod, who will be filling the acting deputy mayor spot at that point. We will be presenting a report to council on May 2nd. And this staff report is being proactive in the event that if the mayor gets elected, we'll provide council with options on how they want to appoint the vacant seat should the mayor be elected. So council from there will choose whether they would like to provide the opportunity to an existing member of council or whether you want to do a public call. And again, depending on what the outcome is, that would give us time to prepare necessary notices for public interest. If that was the selected process, that would be advertised after the June 2nd date, if that's been the confirmed date of provincial election. We'll also be preparing and anticipated for May as well the bylaws as recommended from the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry that speak to the roles of the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the CAO. And some of these, and I haven't had a chance to explore them in detail, I believe there are some bylaws, and I haven't, again, done a thorough analysis yet on what I'm going to be recommending, but council could recommend that the deputy mayor fills any vacancy of the mayor's position. So that will be something that will be further identified in those reports. And our next slide shows what will happen again if June 2nd is the confirmed date. If Mayor Saunders is not elected, then all members obviously return to their regular duties. If elected, again, it depends on that council direction that's going to be provided in May. But June 20th is the first regular meeting. We could call a special meeting earlier to declare the seat vacant. And again, the seat is declared vacant either by official resignation of the mayor or once the announcement of the elected candidates has been provided in the Ontario Gazette. And if council chooses to appoint a current member, and again, depending on the outcome of that report in May, there is the options to appoint the member prior to July 26. And if that's the case, and if That would mean that another seat is declared automatically vacant if a member of current council is appointed to that position. And therefore, we would have to fill that vacancy. If council chooses to choose a replacement after July 26, and this, I guess the importance about the July 26 deadline is that's the 90-day mark prior to the election on October 26. So if council and a vacancy is determined after the July 26 date, that seat can remain open. And there would be options in the event that the deputy mayor is appointed as mayor and the deputy mayor seat becomes vacant. Then even after the July 22nd or July 26th date, a member of council may be appointed to fill that vacancy of the mayor, and then a councillor position would remain vacant until the remainder of the period of this term. And again, this will be further clarified in the report that will come forward in May. It's just meant to provide you with.
Thank you, Clerk Collins. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Can council hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Clerk Collins. Council, any questions or comments for Sarah on this? I can't see everyone, Sarah, so.
Mayor Saunderson, I don't think the clerk was finished.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you, Sarah?
That's okay. If Stephanie could just put down the presentation.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. My screen froze and I thought I'd lost you again, so sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I just wanted to further reiterate that that process will be defined in the May staff report. Should council be in a position at that point to choose the process that they want to go forward with as well. I just wanted to provide it here because I'm getting questions on what the next steps are and wanted to make sure that council and the public was aware of the anticipated flow.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Council, any questions or comments for the clerk? Seeing none, thank you very much for that. My apologies for the interruption. Everyone froze again. I thought I was gonna have to chase you down again. So I'm glad I'm still here. All right, and that takes us then to item 9, other business. Is there any other business tonight, council? Seeing none, that takes us then to item 10, which is public delegations, and I'll look to Clerk Almost to see if there's anyone in our audience that would like to speak to council, the committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there is a member of the public that wishes to address the standing committee regarding any item within the committee's mandate, please press the raise your hand feature. And there's no interest at this time, Your Worship.
All right. Before we just adjourn tonight, there is a procedural question I have, and this flows from our lengthy discussion about the Archway and the deputy mayor's comment about asking for a vote to reconsider. But this is a committee meeting, and it will come back to ratification before council on April 19th. So it will be a fresh vote on the 19th, will it not? I don't know that a reconsideration is required.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so perhaps that assists Deputy Mayor. All right, and with that then, I will look for an adjournment. A notice for adjourn. Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. And I guess before I do call the vote, we do have a special meeting. It's now about a little after 20 to 8. So what I would propose is that we commence the special meeting at 5 to 9. And that gives council time for a break. And unless there's any questions or comments on that.
Is that a different link, Mayor Saunderson?
Clerk Almus, can you answer that, please?
Certainly, it is a different link. And I'm sorry, you said 5 to 9. I'm sure you meant 5 to 8.
Oh, sorry, 5 to 8. I did mean that. Yeah. No, geez.
Tip off shortly after 9.
Yeah. All right. So with that clarification, we will meet again at 5 to 8, and I will look for a vote to adjourn the SIC meeting. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in about 15 minutes. Bye-bye.